Well, good afternoon, and glad you joined us today for the end of the week broadcast of the Chimney and Fireplace Success Network. And today we got something that's going to be really good for you. We're going to tell you what it's all about after we come back from our music in just a minute. But Sheryl, what do you feel like the value of today's material is going to be that we're going to share with our listeners?
I think the value, and I'm not going to give away what everything is, but the value is going to be so you can see what is holding you back in life, your business and personal, and what is helping you progress farther in your life.
Okay, so Brandi, what's your thoughts without revealing what the subject matter is? What do you think the value is we're going to deliver to our listeners today?
Well, I'm going to refer to your business as your house, and it's going to help you really clean and tidy up your house.
That's it. So just stick with us. We'll be right back right after this little few seconds of music here. Well, it did not play. I don't know what's going on. So. Well, that was right embarrassing. Sometimes you hit the button and it doesn't work right. So anyway, to start this off, earlier today, I saw something shared on Facebook, and actually I've shared it on my own Facebook page today because earlier this week, Major League Baseball did something that was really unique. They actually reconstructed the field in Iowa and put on a professional baseball game at the Field of Dreams, and Kevin Costner spoke there. So it kind of gave me thought processes for what we were going to talk about today, because as you build your business, one of the things you're doing is building your Field of Dreams. And what they also did was Kevin Costner walked on the field and spoke. And this was my thought processes. If you had built your Field of Dreams and you had the opportunity to walk on them and speak to all your fans that were amazed by what you accomplished, what would you be saying to them later? So this is kind of what we're giving you today. I think we're going to share with you a process, a method that can help you build that Field of Dreams so much faster. And what are we going to talk about? We're going to talk about something called the SWOT process. And SWOT is spelled SWOT, but we actually have an adaptation at CBC where we add an F on the end. So we call it a SWOT F, which stands for, Brandi, what does the S and the W and the O and the T and the F all stand for?
Sorry, Jerry, I was looking for my unmute button. So
okay.
It's strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, threats, and then the one that is unique to CVC, the F, is your fears.
Correct. So I wrote it back there, what we're talking about, which is the SWOT F. And we've also developed some very unique patterns and processes that we use in this. And the three of us are often involved. Sometimes it'll be myself alone doing these. Sometimes Brandi has joined me there on site doing them. Sheryl has joined me on site. But usually when we're doing one, we actually set it up where Sheryl, Brandi, if they're remote, they actually observe from the distance where they can kind of observe a whole lot more about what's going on here and what we find out from this. But it's really unique. And the reason for this is because you are getting the words from your team members, because this is not where the employer is speaking. Rather, we're going to all the team members to find out what are the strengths, the weaknesses, the opportunities, and the threats and the fears of what they go through. Now, let me make you aware even deeper of what this process involves. The strengths and the weaknesses are always going to be internal issues. The O and the T, the opportunities and the threats, those are going to be external things that can affect the business survival moving forward. The F is more of the personal fears. And we started this last year when the pandemic hit, because so many people had so many fears at that point. And that's one of the things that goes on in this world. So Sheryl, as we look at this, what comes to mind of some of the strengths that come out of most of these companies? But before we go into this, I want to tell you that we're going to deal primarily with the weaknesses, because what we want to do is come up with a strategy to resolve every single weakness in the company. So of strength, Cheryl, what jumps out at you from the SWOT F meetings that we've done?
Well, usually they're talking about their culture being one of their strengths. They're talking about their location being one of the strengths, their teamwork. It's most of it is just what goes on in the normal day would be their strengths that they don't have any issues with.
Right. And so you're aware, one of the things that we started doing, usually in a SWAT meeting, you're asking the group to come out and verbalize what each of them see. But earlier this year, we started a new process. And in the process that we use today, we have them write down so one person's thoughts are not affecting another person's thoughts. So commonly, I will ask each person in the room, and we provide them a 5x8 legal pad to write their notes on and tell us what they see as each of these individual things. So Brandi, what about you? What have you seen as the strengths that people will commonly mention within the business?
They'll mention their teamwork a lot. Some of them will mention their building. Some of them will also list that as a weakness if they don't have the correct capacity. Websites, some of them will mention their websites, and they're very good. It really varies from company to company.
Yeah. You know, another thing that jumps out so many times, we find that the company members will actually mention the owner as being a strength. Brandi, have you noticed that at times, or this is vastly important, they'll talk about the personal culture of that owner, and that will also come out. Brandi, have you seen that in the discussions we've had?
Yeah, you and I just saw it a couple weeks ago at a company we were at doing a SWAT, and to me, that's the best strength a company can have, because the owner is the backbone of that business. So to me, what a compliment. And I think a lot of owners are often afraid to do SWATs. I think that it can be uncomfortable to be in that vulnerable position and listening to all of your employees talking about your strengths and weaknesses. But we have some that, man, they just embrace it.
Yeah, they do. And that's what we found. And this is what I've also found is the SWOT process is something we recommend to be done on an annual basis. And by doing it annually, we're actually looking at the notes from the previous year, and we're able to gauge the progress of that company. It's just like last week, Brandi, when you and I were on site with that client and Cheryl was participating remotely. Did you see how this company had progressed such fantastic ways of moving forward?
Leaps and bounds. They had moved forward leaps and bounds. And Jerry, I think it's important to note, it's not just like our industry that does SWAT meetings. This is everywhere. And it's actually interesting. I love to read about SWATs. So you can actually like just type into your Google browser, Chipotle SWAT or Wendy's SWAT. It will actually bring up, they make this public, it will actually bring up the analysis from their SWAT meetings.
Correct. And that's what, and Brandi just hit an excellent point, because what you want to do is look at companies that I would call market leaders. Look at companies like Southwest Airlines, which is recognized as probably one of the best places to work in America and has a great culture and has a waiting list of people to go to work there. Or another one is Amazon, to watch them examine what their strengths, what their weaknesses are. Cheryl, what do the strengths and weaknesses reveal to you?
They reveal the balance of how a company's working. If there's, you really hope your strengths outrule your weaknesses, but a lot of times they don't. But the thing is, weaknesses and strengths can sometimes be the same thing. So we have to be aware that as we look at them doing this, when we can see what the company people are actually saying, you're not just hearing what the owner of the company says. You're hearing from every individual. And so at these meetings, they get a chance to verbalize what they think, things they might not say just in a regular group. And we've noticed they're very truthful doing it. So you really get a good picture of what the company is at that very moment.
Right. So what we want to do here when we're doing the SWOT, yes, we want to name what are our strengths and we want to stay on top of those strengths. And I commonly refer to it as a Super Bowl winning team. Many times Super Bowl winning teams become Super Bowl losing teams within a few short a short amount of seasons because they don't keep those strengths going. But the real thing that we're drilling down on is the weaknesses. And it is amazing how we continue to pull the same weaknesses out of these companies. So, Cheryl, as I talk about weaknesses, what's that number one thing that always comes out at the top of the list with every single SWOT?
Communication by far is the top one. And I have never, as long as we've been doing this, we have never had a company that was not their number one weakness.
Right. Brandi, what about you? Does it shock you since you started getting involved with us how bad weaknesses of communications are?
It doesn't really shock me. It's one of those things that I think you're never going to get perfect. You can improve upon it, but I think it's going to continue to be the number one. There's just so many facets to communication. So I think it'll continue to be number one for all of these companies that we're working with.
Okay. And Bart is saying, please go over what's involved in a SWOT meeting. A lot of people don't know that. So, yes, we're going to cover that today, Bart. Appreciate you being on here with us. But,
Jerry,
yes.
you misread that. I saw it. He wanted to know who.
Oh, who is involved in a SWOT meeting? Bart, I'm going to go over that too, because actually there are two types of SWOT meetings that we conduct. In fact, next week I'm doing a separate kind than we did last week. And the difference is in one type of SWOT meeting, we involve everyone in the company. Okay. And that's what Brandi and I did last week. We were involved with a very large company in the chimney service industry, and we brought the leadership team in to go through what's called a leadership SWOT, because in the way the process works, it can get right unwieldy. Now, one of the most important things about doing a SWOT, I feel like it is impossible to conduct your own SWOT in-house, because the facilitator has got to be disassociated from this. Many times the owners, the managers may take some of these things personal. In fact, we actually school those managers when they're into this SWOT that they have to be able to listen, be able to not get argumentative in this, and also to observe their people, because you're going to learn a lot about your people in this thing. But again, as you go into this weakness, let me share with you how we determine what's the major concerns. Like I said earlier, we used to just have people contribute verbally. We would say, what do you see are the strengths and the weaknesses? And I would just call on somebody. But the problem was we found out that was discouraging free thinking. So we started the process earlier this year that we have each individual write down what they feel like the strengths, the weaknesses, the opportunities, and the threats are. So when they write these down, then the facilitator, who is usually going to be me, or if we're doing it, Sheryl and Brandi will be involved too if they're on site with me. We then take those individual sheets and we have someone who's recording it onto a flip chart just like this. So we're writing these flip chart sheets down. And what we do, these flip chart sheets are big Post-it notes. So as we fill up a sheet, we actually tear that sheet off and we put it on the wall. So you see all this up on the wall. And you see that Kathy Ray just said, oh, that's a great idea. That's right, Kathy, because when we developed this after we did your SWOT earlier this year, because it had got them free thinking to bring out. So now at this point, what we're doing is we are taking these individual sheets and we're writing down the things up here. And when we get an agreement, we mark a mark beside it. So 2 people, 3 people, 4 people, 8 people, 10 people have listed these things as the strengths and as the weakness. So the person that's writing this down is not good. I'm not a good candidate to write on the flip chart because, be honest with you, my handwriting sucks so bad that nobody can read it. So we usually have someone that will right on the flip chart who's one of the members of the team that will do that. So, Cheryl, what other weaknesses do you commonly see come out?
Like Brandi brought them one up earlier, the size of their building. A lot of them see their employer as a weakness because he's not fulfilling his part of the lead. And that amazes me. And I admire these people for being able to say that, because that's hard for an employee to say on their employer. It can be the fact of, number one, that was the communication, their trucks, they don't have the right tools, the time management, the things, they can't get product. There's just those, let's just say that the weaknesses are usually the longest link.
Right. And I think Mr. Mottola has made an excellent statement here. And Frank, I really congratulate you on it, because to be honest with you, you can have something in the company that is a significant strength and it's going to be a significant weakness. And I'm going to cover one in just a minute. Brandi, we have a lot of people that have implemented very costly, high-end software. So they have this tremendous tool. But what we uncover in the SWAT meeting is they're not using these great tools effectively. Did that jump out at you as we did these SWATs?
It did. I mean, some of these people have been using the software for just a short time, but others have been using it for quite a long time, and they just aren't using it to its full capacity, and they're not using it to help grow the business.
Right. So you can have something that is both a strength and it is a weakness. Okay. So stay with us as we go through this process, because I want you to understand, this is a day-long process. It also needs to be conducted off-site. It needs to be away from your telephones ringing. It needs to be away from service technicians walking in. People need to turn their phones off. There's no Facebook playing. There's no texting outside. We are officially spending this day in strictly how do we make this happen. But there's a lot of things that come out in this that are truly phenomenal. And what it does, it makes the whole team what we call buy into the solutions. Brandi, have you seen significant examples of employee buy-in?
Yeah, and Jerry, I think what's so important to note about the SWAT, again, it is hard. You have to put, as in the owner especially, you have to put yourself in a very vulnerable position, but it gives the employees a voice. It's a day that they don't have to answer the phones. They don't have to go out on the truck, and they get to sit there and point out what they see every day in the business.
Right, because what we do, and I started using this term last couple meetings. As coaches, as facilitators, we are using what I call tough love. And when I say tough love, we're going to say things that may be hard to hear. Cheryl, do you ever have to do this in your coaching relationship with people or in your hiring where you've got to use tough love?
You really don't have any choice. I mean, I'm not a crazy fan of the word coddle, but you have to, there's people that they don't want to hear it, and you have to do it, because if you don't, number one, you don't get what you expect. Also, they don't become the employee they can become. And so, yes, you have to use tough love, just as you do with a child, just as you do with your spouse, actually. It's just something that you're doing it for their betterment, not just because of an attitude that you're having.
Correct. One of the weaknesses that we commonly uncover, and this takes some education and buy-in to get the whole team on it, which is what we classify as lack of capacity. In other words, you simply don't have enough people to satisfy the demand of the customer, which is a very precarious situation to be into, because number one, you're not fulfilling your customer's promise. You are not delivering on time. And to be honest with you, you are inviting someone to open up right against you and open a business in competition with you when you cannot serve clients in a rapid manner. Just think about it yourself. I know that Brandi that's on here, Sheryl that's on here, myself, we are all people that want it now. When we decide we need a service, we want it provided. If we have something broke down, I'm sorry, we want it fixed. Brandi, when that garage door is not working right, you're ready to move and hire somebody to get it fixed. Am I correct?
Yeah, somebody's got to fix it that day.
Right. So what we're doing is we're coming up, and many times as we go through this, from the processes that we find are using, we will find that maybe there are 20, 25, 30 or more weaknesses in the company. Now, as you're looking at this, Sheryl, have you noticed that as we look at these weaknesses, many times it can be combined under a bunch of weaknesses have one cause? Have you noticed that?
Yes, I mean, that's just kind of normal, I think. Each individual person sees a spectrum of that particular weakness. The next one sees a different spectrum. And so we have them on our list, and I just call that their spectrums. Then when you combine them, they're actually all one weakness. It's just different facets of it.
Right. And Brandi, one of the things that just is chaos to me and you is that word spelled WASTE, waste. And
Yes.
so often as we look at this index of problems, do you kind of compute in your head why we're having the waste factors we do in those businesses?
Oh yes, I'm in my head. I'm actually putting them into the different lean categories and sitting there and solving them in my head.
Yeah, but the communication, often what we find out is they're having fumbles in the handoff of equipment. And this is common because the person that may have sold the job, they know exactly what needs to be done. But the problem is the person who's going to actually perform the repair doesn't know. And so that's some of the communication where they're handing the information off improperly. Brandi, have we also been able to determine where people are messing up by not taking advantage of the software?
Oh yeah, for sure.
Okay. What about in the training?
To the training, and even more specifically the onboarding, I would say, and even the hiring, to go back even further, the hiring process.
Right. So one of the things, like I said, is if you're going to hire people in today's world, it's becoming evident that you've got to come up with some real innovative ideas, such as it may include recruitment bonuses. And sometimes people will ask, they're really scared to offer that recruitment bonus, but you got to build a program to satisfy that recruitment bonus, but they're very scared they're not going to get buy-in. So what we've got to accomplish in this meeting is we've got to accomplish buy-in and agreement for everybody of what the company has to do to move forward. Sheryl, do you recognize that happening?
We do. The thing is, you see things like this going on every day, and we all just have to be very wide open about what we're seeing. A lot of times we want to, and I'm kind of getting off key here, but I think it's important to say, I sometimes think we're looking through colored glasses, trying not to see the problems. And we do. It's just we're not ready to deal with them. So we just push them off to the side, and the small problem then becomes a huge problem, which during the SWOT comes out very evidently.
Correct.
Sorry for getting off track.
No, you're fine. The next letter I want to key on is that O letter. And the O stands for opportunities. Now, in today's world, Brandi, in your business, Flues Brothers, if we told you there was a new service to provide or something else, in today's, you're probably not going to go after it because you don't have the capacity to fulfill doing new things, such as, it could be any number of things, but you don't have that capacity. But at the same time, we've got to anticipate that market conditions could change. And as we go into the opportunities, the common way I will rephrase this, what if the bull market stopped tomorrow? What if the phone stopped ringing tomorrow? What if this backlog suddenly started dwindling and going away? We may need to be looking at new opportunities. So we go into the opportunities, and when we go into here, what we hear is we hear a lot of good ideas. We hear people come up with things like, hey, we could expand into gutter cleaning. We could expand into outdoor living. We could expand into fire pits. And the list of these things goes on and on. And here's the neat thing about this. It gives the people on your team the feeling that their opinion matters in the way we're going to direct this company going forward. Sheryl, do you see that as one of the things that comes out of this?
You do. It's just the directive that things are going on. And this is what we're looking for people to see. If they need to see the directive, they need to see where you're going, they need to see where you've been. And with all that happening, then we can take you a level higher. Like Brandi said, the one y'all, I can't get it out, did last week, you saw such a huge difference. If you can see this difference every year after we do them, the directives are clear.
Correct. And we've got more parts of this process. Like I said, we spent the last 10 years perfecting the SWOT process. Like I said, we have done a lot of these. We're trained for them, and we have devised our special little ways to do this. Now, the next part of the SWOT is this one, which is the T. And T stands for threats. And what we're trying to do here is make people aware of the threats that are out there and the threats that could compromise your business survival. And a couple of them we cover are like government regulations. A big one right now is the second coming of COVID, which is a very real thing, and you got to be prepared for this. But by going through these threats and having everyone, again, write this down on their paper and putting them all down, and you go from that point and you can get the threats that are out there. So Brandi, do the threats help people out in how to go forward in the company and helping the buy-in?
Yeah, I think with both the threats and the fears, a lot of times they go unspoken, probably too often. And so having the opportunity to get those out there and express them, I think just increases morale.
Yep. And see, that takes us to the next one. This is one we started doing last year. And the reason we started doing that was COVID-19, the coronavirus, the pandemic. Because what happened for the very first time in so many of our lifetimes, this world changed and people have fears. And one of the places for fears to be eradicated is simple the matter of communication. Because what we've got to do is, and you can be as hard-nosed as you want to be, but if you're going to lead a team of people, you've got to understand what their fears are. Because if you trod on those fears, what's going to happen is you could lose a very valuable person. So to me, going through the fears segment tells me a lot about the people that are on that team. Brandi, what about you? Does it reveal a lot to you?
Yeah, I agree. I'm so happy that you added the F. I think it's just such an important component to the entire process. And I'm sure you're headed here, Jerry, but I'm like Sheryl today. I'm like all over the place, off track. But it's important to note as we go through these, we're not just there to write them down on paper. We're there to figure out how do we correct them. And you had brought up the company we were at a week or two ago. I can't even remember what day it is. I feel like today. And it was so interesting just to look back. They've been doing SWATs for years, but just to look back even last year and see such a huge difference in the entire thing. The strengths, the opportunities, everything had changed so much, and they had improved upon so much. It was actually hard on some parts because they have made such improvement.
Right. And Sheryl, this particular one that we're talking about last week, I did their first SWAT 4 years ago, and you actually traveled with me. We did that SWAT in September. It was a cold, rainy day in September. We also learned something during that SWAT that was vastly important, which is you should never go off site for lunch during a SWAT. You always bring the SWAT in, because if you leave the facility and go to lunch somewhere, it's going to break the rhythm and you will not be able to get it back to gear. So you want to make sure there is processes to follow and how to build a proper SWAT. But Cheryl, do you remember that September day and how disoriented that company was at that point, and how you could see they did not agree with each other?
It was definitely, the word lack of communication was huge there. Each had their own little venue, and it was like they couldn't see the mass picture. And I think that's how most companies are if they're not doing SWATs. Each person's seeing their box, and the next box is just another piece. The SWATs actually pull you back. They give you what you call the 10,000 view above, so you can see, you can hear. Not only is it visual, it's auditory. It's written, and it's there for prosperity, because we know we still have the SWAT notes from those meetings, and you compare them every year. And the thing I have liked the most is when you have the improvement, like the one from a couple of weeks ago, the look on these people's eyes of seeing how far they have come. And also it shows the new employees that weren't there during previous spots, okay, we were here, now we're here. Now you help us get here.
Okay.
And I think that's so important.
Right. And that's where it goes down to building that field of dreams. Okay. So don't go away, because we still got more to share with you in this process as we go through. So what we've done, we've had everybody write down what they feel like the strengths, the weaknesses, the opportunities, and the threats are, and the fears within the company. Okay. Now we're going in at this point, we're into late morning usually at this point. But before we go to lunch, I kind of want to come up with, what do you guys feel, and would you vote as the major strengths, the major weaknesses, the major opportunities, and the threats? So then we take a poll of the people, and this is where we come up, because as we start taking that poll, Brandi, have you noticed how many of those red marks we start making beside that word communication?
Yes. Well, and just I think in general, somebody may have written down an item. We won't say what it is. I don't know. But nobody else votes on it. But then somebody else mentioned item B, and everybody had that same one. They had that same fear.
Right. So what we're doing at this point is, once we get that, we want people to now tell us what you mean. And this is the amazing thing that starts happening. All of a sudden, they're going to bring up one incident. There is one incident that happened in the past that they're hung up on. It's not a major incident. It could be something very minor. But what's happening, this person has bottled this up in their minds for possibly years. And by all of a sudden being able to talk about this, what they're able to do is move past that. Cheryl, have you seen that occur in these sessions?
More than once. It's amazing. It's kind of like they realize that it's just their problem, and they realize that maybe it's minor, and then it's just like any problem, whether it's personal or whatever. If you talk about it, it helps. Some people talk about it too much and drag it out, but you do need, if you have a problem, you need to find somebody and work it out with them if you can't get there on your own means.
Right. And so one of the additional things, with there being 3 of us involved at times, which is really a great process, the things that I'm looking at and the things that Brandi is looking at and the things that Cheryl is looking at, they're all different areas, such as one of Cheryl's unique abilities is being able to observe the communication and being able to see what kind of behavior patterns people have. And Cheryl, you're actually able to determine who's bad apples in a company. Would you agree with that?
It's not hard to do. It's a matter, I've been a people watcher all my life. I've just taken it to a new level doing it in these things. But yeah, you can pick out who's not attentive, who's not there. My major observations is body language, the way they communicate, if they communicate, and just their general demeanor while in the meeting. And usually, yes, you can pick out a bad apple very quickly.
Right. So a lot of times involves you will review or you will administer DISC assessments and may even doing a individual debriefing on this. And it's like earlier this week, you did a group debriefing with the company to allow them to understand better what they're feeling, what their feelings are, and to recognize the communication style of others, including their customers, which can help close more jobs and those type of things. Will that be true?
It's true. The thing about it is the disc getting the overall answer, but it narrows you down. It's a focus that you can work on. And if you can learn to read yours, you can actually, from the way people verbalize things, from the movements of their hands, the way they do, you can look at your customer and tell exactly how to talk to them so you can make better sales. And even we've carried it on even farther into telephone conversations, how you can, or emails, any kind of conversation that you're not in front of the person, how you can figure out where they stand on the sales spectrum. Are they going to be a fast sell? Are they going to be a slow sell? Are you going to have to give them more details? It's very easy once you know the steps.
Right. So, Brandi, when you're observing a SWOT, what do you feel are the things that jump out at you the most from your area expertise, looking at office systems, communication, how these things are coming together, removal of waste? What's the things that jump out at you most from a SWOT process like this?
Well, Jerry, as you know, I also write down what I think the strengths and weaknesses are, because these are companies that I work with as well. So I go into it knowing a lot of those strengths, weaknesses, opportunities. So I'll make my own list of things that maybe perhaps that they left out. I, like Sheryl do, I also like to look at the body language, and you can tell there's always that one person that's very exuberant and excited and really engaged, and then there's always that one person that they just act like they don't want to be there.
Yep, you can always pick this out, and this will give you examples of potentially where you have apples in the team that maybe could be part of your problems there. Now, as we go through this, remember, we have put all these charts up on the wall. What we're also doing is we have a bunch of different colored markers we're using. We may be writing in red, we might be writing in green, we may be writing in blue. So as we come up, remember, what we're wanting to do is we want these people involved in the strategy of how to remove the pain and the chaos. Because this is one thing that you're going to find. If your people are involved in the map to be better, you're going to get remarkable buy-in. It's going to be vastly superior than thinking you are Julius Caesar and this is the way it shall be. Remember what happened to Julius Caesar? His lieutenants came up and I believe they stabbed him to death many, many years ago because Julius Caesar wanted to be the emperor. And that's commonly what happens, because in today's world, being an emperor is not going to get you where you want to go. And that's what you're doing here is you are building the strength. Remember one of the things that Dr. Maxwell always says, that what you want to do is you want to lead a team of leaders. You don't want to lead a team of followers. You want to build people that will be leaders in the company. That's how you're going to move forward and build a company of higher value. So we've got all these charts up on the wall, and what do we do with them now? Every single chart sheets up there is photographed, and we put this into a photo journal because what we're wanting to do is when we do our next SWOT, we want to be able to review past SWOTs. Brandi, did you notice when we did one a couple weeks ago that people actually brought that on their own, the copies of the previous?
I will admit that actually shocked me.
It shocked you because it was, and you could see that it gives you a unique ability to see what your batting average is of what's going on. But again, we're not done. If you simply do a SWOT and head home and start doing business just like you were before, then the process is going to fail. So what you've got to do, and this is where Brandi, Sheryl, myself come in with this, we will commonly do what we call a SWOT debriefing. In fact, Brandi, you and I did a SWOT debriefing, I believe, was it yesterday morning or the day before? We did a SWOT debriefing on a previous SWOT. Which day was it?
I think it was Wednesday.
Whatever day it was about 2 days ago. But in the SWOT debriefing, what we're doing is now we're meeting with that owner or possibly the owner and the GM, but we're dealing with the people at the top. And these are the questions that comes out of here. Because of all this, we've isolated two strategies that we've got to employ going forward. So this is the important part of it, is doing the SWOT debriefing after it's over with. Again, these are processes as we build this process in our company of how to do this, because we're doing this, we do this for a lot of people. So that's how we come up at the end to develop this strategy, because you've got to put forth and you got to have a way to put these strategies into effect. So Brandi, what would you say about the debriefing process?
With at least all the SWATs that I've been involved in, I'm always so, I guess, happy to see how involved the owner and sometimes like the general manager are in wanting to make a difference and in wanting to address these and wanting to make changes. We have one we did, I think it was back in May, and we had kind of come up with a list of things to work on. And by the time we did the debriefing, that company owner had already implemented like 3 of the things on the list.
It really is. It's really amazing. Now, this is one of the things that happens. This tells us that we got a communication issue. Brandi, what's it feel like for a person that's in that meeting to fire off at you, myself, nasty emails the next day? What is that telling us, Brandi, when we see that happen?
You've stumped me.
It's telling us that someone did not share their thoughts. Someone held back in that meeting. Because Brandi, that's not the first time I've seen that happen. I've actually done SWATs where someone on the team would email me later, or I would be in their office and say, hey, I need to talk to you. And they would start telling me these thoughts. And it's like I would ask them, why did you not speak this out? What's holding your people back? And having to go through to make that communication, to drag it out of them sometime. Because here's what will happen. If your people have their inner thoughts, their inner fears that stay inside of them, it's still going to come out at a later point. One of the things that I often compare this to is, and Sheryl can best answer this, because be honest with you, Brandi, you're not going to be able to answer this like Sheryl can. And I'm going to put her on the spot in just a minute. Sheryl, you've been married more than one time. Am I correct?
Yes.
In your previous marriages, because I am your third husband,
My baseball.
Huh?
My baseball. 3 strikes, you're out.
3 strikes, you're out. But anyway, here's the thought process. I've been married 1 time before. She's been married 2 times before. Are there deep set fears of things that went through in a failed relationship that can just bottle inside of you?
Some, probably not to the point that you've held on to some, but I kind of tried to work mine through as I go. There's some things that I do now that I didn't do then and wished I had. Yes.
Okay.
But I think it's called baggage. I think you have baggage from any relationship, whether it's marriages or even just past dating relationships. So, and we bring friendship baggages in with us. But yes, are there fears? There are. And I think there will always be, because you have passed that gate once. You refuse to pass that gate again.
Right. And again, goes back to what's the resolution to so many of these things? It's called communication. And as we go into every single company, we find out that communication, or lack of, is a number one hindrance and the number one cause by chaos. We don't pass the information across. We think everybody knows. And the problem is people aren't mind readers. So by going by this, what we also able to determine is that so often we look at it from the following. Brandi, how much information do you think you have in your head at this stage in your life? And how long would it take you to tell someone everything that Brandi Bidswell knows about being in business, nursing, as a mother, as a child? How much information do you think's in your head?
A ton. We don't have enough time to go over it all.
That's exactly right. And that's what I'm trying to get out here. This is what's got to be done. This is why training is vastly important, to get the things that are in your mind, in your head, out to those other people that you lead. This is also how you're going to free those handcuffs, how you take those chains off that may be restraining you and holding you back and trapping you in life into certain things. Brandi, it's kind of like, you and Jeremy are Dave Ramsey followers, and you have a life goal, and y'all have achieved this of being debt free. By being debt free, how has that freed you emotionally, mentally, and physically in your life?
Well, I think they say, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think when reading the research, they say the number one thing couples fight about are the finances. And so if you don't have those bills to fight over on a month-to-month basis, that mortgage payment, that car payment, it's very freeing.
Yeah. So anyway, this is the information we want to share with you today. That is that the SWOT and the SWOT-F process are processes that can move you exponentially to a much higher level in where you want to go, where you can build that field of dreams. It's just like I put on my Facebook earlier today, because Kevin Costner walked on that field earlier this week when the Chicago White Sox and the New York Yankees were getting ready to play. And my thought process was, and that's what I wrote on Facebook, what would it be like to be able to walk into your own field of dreams that you built? And what would you say to the people that are surrounding you and looking at you? Because that's what this is all about. What we want to share with you is the ways to build that field of dreams for you. So Sheryl, what would you say in ending this broadcast today about SWOTs and the value?
I think it is one of the most beneficial things that you can have done for your company, for yourself, whatever you need to do. Even having it done for your company gives you some self-enlightenment over what you need to do. And I almost think some way along the line it ought to be mandatory for a company to do it at least once a year.
Got you covered. So Brandi, what about what parting thoughts would you have on how SWOTs can help you build that field of dreams?
Yeah, I would say if you have never done a SWOT and you're watching this, please get in contact with us because we would love to conduct one for you. Make it a safe space. If you still want to read more about a SWOT or get into the details, I highly recommend looking up Chipotle's SWOT and Wendy's SWOT. They're just very fascinating to read through. But if this is the way to get to your field of dreams, this is the way to get to that next level.
Right. And also, so you'll know, if you are a subscriber to our educational platform, the CVC Virtual Academy, there is a course on there about how to do this. And I'm also writing an article this afternoon about this also. That'll be in the next edition of Sweeping, which is a publication of the National Chimney Sweep Guild. So, but it is an excellent process. It's a process for you to perfect your system, because this is what it's all about. You got dreams. And I will bet you got chaos in your life. I'll just bet you. And whatever that chaos is, if you want to resolve it, you got to go after it. You got to figure out what that resolve is and how do you fix it. And with that, we appreciate you joining this week, as always, here on the Chimney and Fireplace Success Network. Tune us in Monday at a special broadcast time with a special guest. And these two ladies are going to get to interview someone that they're really looking forward to. So, Brandi, who's our special guest on Monday at 4 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time that you're going to get to ask those questions that you've been wanting to ask?
Tommy Mello. And I sure hope he is prepared, because I have a laundry list of questions.
That's it. You know, I know when I asked Brandi to be prepared, I know she is prepared for that mission. And this might just turn into the Brandi show on Monday, because I know how Brandi has those questions. But what about you, Sheryl? You've been on calls with Tommy before, and you know how phenomenal Tommy Mello is. So what's your thought process on Tommy, your opportunity to ask Tommy anything on Monday?
My number one question is, how much Red Bull do you drink in a short period of time? But other than that, there are some business questions that I want to bring out, because I think he gives a whole new perspective to businesses. I mean, he's a young, he's not old by any means, but he works 23.5 hours a day. And he has more to give, I think, than almost anyone else I've ever heard in a short period of time.
That's it. So we got Tommy Mello on Monday, and then next Friday at our regular time, we got another guest coming on. Now these two ladies don't really know the next guest that much, but they're going to have some time to research and ask some questions. But that guy's name is Al Levy, and Al Levy is the 7-Power coach, comes out of the plumbing heating industries, and has also worked with some chimney sweep companies. So that's for next Friday. So we appreciate you being with us. Keep in mind, we do this show to share ideas for you. Looky there. Jared just said, Tommy excited to tune in. That's right. So anyway, we do all this, but our mission is to help you reach your business dreams. Turn those dreams into your field of dreams. So if we can help you in any way, whether it's helping you facilitate a SWOT, Sheryl helping you with DISC assessment, behavior pattern assessments in your hiring processes, Brandi and helping you with your office processes, those type of things, or myself or what I do, which is an operations systems technical sides, we're ready to help you any way we can. You see our email addresses in front of us. Just reach out to us. We'd love to have a conversation with you. And with that, we'll see you Monday afternoon, 4 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time. And you don't want to miss a jam-packed interview with Mr. Tommy Mello, because it is truly going to be unique for you. So we'll see you guys then. Have a great weekend as always.